I think for most of us, there comes a time in life when the surface, shallow things don't satisfy us anymore. We sense there is more to us, more to God, more to life. Put out into deep water and lower your nets for a catch. This is what Jesus says to us in today's gospel. It was the beginning of his ministry. A crowd gathered one day to hear him speak, nearly pushing him right into the sea. 2 boats pulled up on the beach, fishing boats. And having been out all night without anything to show for their work, besides a little seaweed stuck in their nets, they were busy cleaning up, ready to go to bed. Jesus gets into one of the boats, Simon Peter's boat, and he says, "Just take me a little bit offshore so it's easier for me to address the crowds." I can picture this burly fisherman nodding off while Jesus talked, just as maybe some of you do when you come to church on Sunday. But when Jesus finished speaking, he made his next move. He turns to Simon and he says those words, "Simon, put out into the deep water and lower your nets for a catch." And then Simon's response, "Master, we've worked hard all night long and have caught nothing. Finally, there's somebody singing my song. Don't we all know that tune too well? We cast our net, we cast our net, we cast our net again, and it still comes up empty. Or maybe it comes up with the haul, the equivalent of an empty beer can, a Band-Aid, and maybe throw in a plastic bag. But we know we're tired. And as if that wasn't enough of a slap in the face, keep in mind that Simon was an experienced fisherman. He knew that the best time to catch fish was at night, when the water was cool and the fish were sluggish and the darkness hid the nets. So this story was never about fishing. It's all about relationship. Simon had to make a choice. He says, okay, even though everything in me tells me that what Jesus is asking me to do is totally illogical and makes no sense, Lord, if you command me to, I will do it. And I think that little voice that often speaks to us is what saves us. When we say, Jesus, if you just tell me to do that thing, I'll do it. Even though he whispers underneath our loud complaints, however justified, so what if you've been to that spot before? So what if your net came up empty? Does that mean that there aren't fish out there? So let me tell you a little fishing story. Donald Hayes was out fishing one day with his granddaughter, Alicia. She was 2.5 years old. So, of course, in the middle of the fishing trip, she had to go potty. So she runs off and she leaves her grandfather holding this 2.5-foot pink Barbie doll rod and reel. Well, the next thing, of course, that happened is he feels his tug on the line, and of course, it's that monster fish. More than he ever bargained for. And shucks, he said, you know, I'll never hold this, but for 25 minutes he struggled, and he finally hauled it in. It was a record 21-pound channel catfish. Afterwards, the previous record holder was quoted as saying, you know, if you use smaller gear, you'll never get a big catfish into the boat. Well, nobody ever told Donald this, and I'll bet that his rod and reel was not hot pink either. So today, we're asked a very fundamental question. What is the deep water in your relationship with God? Where are you called to go a little further offshore, moving out of the comfort zone of our usual waters to try something new? Does God speak to you directly through the Bible? Well then, how has your fishing been? Does God speak to you through prayer and meditation? Do you make time to listen? Have you ever fasted from eating, from talking, from anything? Have you ever shared a deep water experience that you've had with God with someone else? You know, it's hard to catch fish if you always keep your net neatly folded, packed away on a shelf in a hall closet. And it's hard to be caught in the net of God's love if you aren't even willing to put your toe in the water. Or maybe you're like me, and God is calling you to let go of the illusion that you're the one controlling the boat. Spiritual nourishment comes from going deep with God, because deep water is where the fish are. And the great catch of fish that Simon reels in makes him feel unworthy of his calling. He knows he doesn't deserve this. But you know what? When it comes to God's grace, none of us do. We might wonder why Simon was put in such an embarrassing situation. Why did he have to publicly say that he was a sinner? But it was this honest realization of who he was, who Jesus is, that was necessary for that deep, real, and personal relationship that Jesus was looking for. And then Jesus says to Simon, just as he says to us, don't be afraid, because we've got bigger fish to fry. Did you notice that Jesus doesn't issue an invitation? It's a pronouncement. He says, you're going to catch people. But it doesn't mean that we trap people, we coerce people, we don't lure people into church with our bait and switch programs. No, if this is catching, it's a catch and release program. One of my favorite mystics, Meister Eckhart, wrote, he says, God lies in wait for us with nothing so much as love. And that love is like a fisherman's hook. He or she who is caught by love is held by the strongest of bonds. And yet, the stress on the line is pleasant. When one has found this way, he or she looks for no other. To hang on this hook is to be so completely captured that feet and hands, mouth and eyes, the heart, all a man or woman is, becomes God's own. This is catch, but it's catch and release. And it's a wonderful thing to be caught by God. Another way to read this is saying that when we catch people, we will captivate people. That hopefully people will be captivated by our lives of love and swallow it, hook, line, and sinker, because that love is the deepest of our human needs. So, in a couple of days, we're going to enter this wonderful season of Lent. It's a time that we use prayer and fasting and almsgiving to help us respond to God's call to holiness. So that's my question today. How might you use this Lent to help you put out into the deep? To go boldly where you have not gone before. Because when it comes to the kingdom of God and our lives of love, we are live bait.